I've had partnerships that have worked beautifully, and I've had partnerships that have crashed and burned. One of the best partnerships I have is in my real estate business, and that's because my partner and I have complementary skills, and we stay in our lanes of our responsibilities and our competence. Some of my worst off partnerships have been situations where I don't have control, or there's communication errors, miscommunications, and no repercussions or ramifications for those miscommunications. Today, we're going to jump into partnerships, why you would want to partner, what kind of partnerships work, why they fail, and so much more. Stick around, but be sure to hit that subscribe button. So today we're talking partnerships. This is a fun subject because I have met a lot of people that are either very, very anti-partnerships, will never partner with somebody in business, and I have met people that will never do business by themselves again because of the value that they see in partnerships. Personally, I was somebody that was always very skeptical of partnerships. I never really thought that I would want to do partnerships in business. And in my primary business, I do not have any partners. I have full control. I don't report to anybody. I'm not responsible to anybody except for my employees and my customers. However, I also have businesses with partners, and there are fantastic benefits to partnerships. So some of the advantages or some of the reasons that people would partner are to have more cash available. You will typically have more cash available to buy a business, to invest in a business, whatever the case may be. Another is skills. So I mentioned earlier, my partner and I have complementary skills. If you need to fill a certain gap in skills, then partnership is often a way to go, because it's not just hiring somebody, it's partnering with somebody that you know is going to stick around. I have a software business where I have a partner that's the technical co-founder. So he knows all things software development that is just outside of my realm of expertise. Another reason to partner is just to share the workload. There are people that, depending on the type of business or their own personal schedules, they don't have the time or capacity to do everything that needs to be done. So they want a partner to share the workload and maybe to hold them accountable to each other as well. There are strategic partnerships. So you might partner with somebody because they have a strategic advantage in an industry that makes a good partnership. And then there are partnerships that you would enter into just to increase your credibility, whether it's somebody that has a strong background in the industry to present to customers, or financial credibility to talk to banks. So those are some of the reasons that you would want to consider a partnership if you're buying a business or starting a business. So what are the different types of partnerships? There are pretty much an infinite number of types of partnership. You can partner in all different ways, shapes, and forms. One of the most common ones that most people think of when they're thinking of a partnership is just a straight 50-50 partnership. Both people enter into the agreement. They both put in the same amount of cash. They both plan to do the same amount of work, and everything is equal, split down the middle. They both take home 50% of the profits. This type of partnership can work great. It can go south. There's lots of variations of outcomes in this type of partnership. You can also adjust those percentages. So it could be 60-40. It could be 70-30. It could be 80-20. All different levels, whatever fits your needs. 50-50 is one of the most common ones out there, and it is usually what people think of when they think of a partnership. And again, you can adjust those percentages based on money, based on time, based on effort, based on knowledge. The amount of money somebody brings to a partnership can impact their percentage of ownership. So while it's not really necessarily a different type of partnership, there are money versus sweat equity partnerships. So where one person might be putting in all of the finances, another person is putting in all of the work and the effort. This is a money sweat equity partnership. It could still be 50-50. It could be 80-20. It could be 60-40. It could be whatever. The actual percentages get worked out between the parties involved. Now, with a finance sweat equity partnership, there are a couple things to be careful of. One is that sweat equity person also getting a salary for their work, or are they only getting profits from the business? And how are those profits split? One of the things that I found is if you have a sweat equity partner, a lot of times they're not putting in money because they don't have the money. That's why they're bringing in a financial partner. And so for them to run the business and do all the things business related, they're going to need cash in the short run to live off of if you want them to do a good job. So they're still going to need to get some kind of salary. And usually that is a agreed upon salary based on what a typical person in that industry would get paid. Now, maybe they're taking a little bit of a lower salary because what they should get paid is the sweat equity that's going into the business. So for example, if the financial partner puts in $100,000 and the sweat equity partner, the role in their job would typically be $100,000 a year, maybe they're only taking a $75,000 salary for the first 4 years, so that extra $25,000 that they would have gotten paid, or what they would have had to pay a typical person in that role, is getting rolled back into the business so that the business can become more profitable quicker. And that financial partner doesn't feel like they put in all the money, now they're paying this person to do all the work. And what difference would it have been if they had just hired somebody to do the work and they wouldn't have had to give up any equity? So something to be mindful of when you're doing a financial and sweat equity partnership is how that payments work. Make sure that everybody's on the same page before you execute that agreement and buy the business. Another semi-related partnership is a passive investors versus active investors. And that can kind of play out in the same way as a financial investor and a sweat equity investor. But in this case, even if you have passive investors, the active investors still might be putting in their own money as well, and then therefore collecting their salaries and the percentage of ownership, percentage of dividends that they are entitled to based on the operating agreement and the ownership structure. And another type of partnership is a strategic partnership. So if you've ever watched Shark Tank, you will notice that some of the people pitching their companies to the sharks mention the fact that they're really there. They don't necessarily need the money. They're just there for the strategic value that a shark brings to them. Now, that could be business mentorship and knowledge. That could be connections and doors that a strategic partner can open. For example, you pull in a strategic partner, you give them a percentage of the equity because that person is so well connected in your industry that they can open customer doors for you or vendor doors for you and get you connected into that industry much faster than you would on your own. Strategic partners can also bring a strong balance sheet. So when you go to a bank for loans, you have better leverage. Strategic partners can also bring patents or industry expertise into the business that you might not have otherwise. So strategic partnerships are usually something where somebody is getting equity because of the strategic value that they are bringing to the business. Again, as in any type of partnership, everything needs to be documented very well. Operating agreements are your best friend in a partnership. And I've heard a lot of people refer to these as operating disagreements. And that is because you typically don't even look at those operating agreements when everything is running smoothly. They only come out when there are problems, when somebody's not doing something that somebody else expected, or when somebody's doing something that somebody else doesn't like. That's when people start looking to that operating agreement to see what ramifications they have or what leverage they have over the other person to decide how something should happen. So make sure that that is well documented. In theory, you can do an operating agreement all by yourself with your partner. There are also lots of attorneys out there that will put together an operating agreement for you. There are other attorneys that specialize in business operating agreements, particularly in partnerships, and those are the types of people that you want to find to do your operating agreement. They will sit down and ask the two of you a million questions, some very personal questions, to make sure that everything is laid out in the case of anything going wrong, that you are covered and you know how to deal with it. Some of the things that will come up are, what happens if one of you gets hit by a bus? What happens if one of you's incapacitated in the hospital for a long time? A lot of people think about death, but they don't think about long-term disabilities or other mental capacity issues, especially as you age. If one of you gets dementia, Alzheimer's, like how is that dealt with in the partnership? So it sounds cumbersome and it can be very daunting, but sitting down with a good attorney that specializes in partnership agreements for a few hours is well worth the upfront investment if you're going to partner with somebody for the long term. What are some of the things that make a partnership work well? I mentioned it earlier with my partner and I, complementary skills. My partner in real estate handles all the construction work. He handles all the maintenance, any issues that come up. That's his lane. He takes care of it. He goes and looks at properties to put together rehab budgets before we make offers. Whereas I handle all the finances, I handle the banking relationships, insurance, I manage the tenants and our rentals, and he takes care of all the other stuff. So having those complementary skills and not stepping on each other's toes makes the partnership work well. If you're in marketing and you get into a partnership with another person in marketing, there's a good chance you're going to have disagreements over tactics and issues as they come up that could sour the relationship over time. If neither of you are good with finances, who's running the finances for the business? If neither of you are good at sales, who's running the sales? So make sure that you're partnering with somebody that has good complementary skills to you. Now, that doesn't mean that you can never partner with somebody that has similar skills, but just make sure that if you do that, your lanes are clearly defined. Even if you both have marketing backgrounds, make sure it's clear of who's in charge of the final decision and who's in charge of other aspects of the business. Open communication is another vital tool for partnerships. One of the areas where even with my real estate partner that goes very well, we have a good partnership. We've done a lot together because we're partners. The most challenging times we've had are times where we're not communicating regularly. So it's one of the things that we've implemented more recently is we have weekly calls that are mandatory. We cleared our schedules at a certain day and time, and we jump on a call at the very least. We usually talk more than once a week, but at that day and time, we are going through a bulleted list of items that we know that we need to cover for the week, every week. And that's part of keeping that open communication. When you don't communicate, problems fester, issues kind of bubble and get they can annoy you and build into bigger things in your head than they really are. So make sure you're keeping communication. Another great thing that you want in a partnership is alignment on long-term vision. You all need to have the same long-term vision. Where are you taking the company? If one person is wanting to pull out as much cash as quickly as possible, and somebody else wants to keep reinvesting in the business for the next 20 years so that they can have a massive exit in 20 years, you're going to have a lot of conflicts. Because that person's expecting a payday every day, whereas the other person wants that money to go reinvest in the business to make it more valuable down the road. So make sure that you're clear on your long-term visions and that you both have the same outlook for the business. Some of the red flags in a potential partner, they don't like to communicate. They won't answer your phone calls. They won't return your text messages. Probably not a great partner. Steer clear of that open communication problem. If you can't even get that before your partner, is going to be a bigger problem after your partner. If they have different financial incentives, like I just mentioned, that if they're wanting short-term cash and you're wanting long-term equity, you're going to have a misalignment. That can be solved for in an operating agreement. Maybe that person is taking cash sooner and you're reinvesting yours for a larger percentage of the business in the long run, which you can do. But that misalignment of incentives of what you want out of the business is a red flag to watch for, and you may not want to get into a partnership in that situation. And another red flag is that the person is looking at the business more as a hobby. They don't want to give up their time or energy or effort or their other job or whatever it is, and they want to do it to have fun. I've seen this a lot in the restaurant bar space, where a group of friends invest in a bar or restaurant together, where one person is the kind of the operating partner and the other people just think it would be a lot of fun to own a bar together, and they come in and kind of abuse their privileges or don't treat it as seriously as it should be. And that operating partner can get frustrated and start causing conflicts with the partnership. So make sure that all of the partners are on board with the fact that you are buying a business. It's not just a fun hobby. So in closing, partnerships can be a great way to accelerate your growth, to buy a business that you might not otherwise be able to buy. There's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go further, go with people. And that's where partnerships can really come in handy. Going further, going bigger, working with other people, being collaborative. Just if you do it, make sure there is clarity on the vision, make sure there is great communication, and make sure you have all your legal documents in order. That's it for partnerships today. I really hope you enjoyed this and brought you some value. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. If I missed any key points, which I'm sure I did, please let me know in the comments below as well. Maybe we'll do another version in the future, adding in some of the things that you all can share with us as well. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it if you take a second to hit subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon.